I don't sound the way that I do in my head. And now I need to start filtering myself before I speak. I can say that we've built the one AI in the world that is best at hearing how you actually sound.
Anada is the co-founder and CEO of BoldVoice, an AI speech coach for non-native English speakers with over 5 million downloads in more than 100 countries. And personally, one of my favorite apps. At what point you said this thing that I've experienced might be an interesting business?
Accent it's not the goal. It's all about communication clarity and confidence. If you're a founder, it's never about sounding American.
Anada grew up in Albania and moved to the US at 18. And today runs what she calls an audio AI lab. 10 people doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue. How have you seen the consumer marketing landscape shift given all the AI tools?
I think a lot of the attention is also moving away from Instagram discovery, happening more ChatGPT or Claude, where you can just run ads.
Today, we talk about how a team that small built AI that hears what the billion-dollar voice labs miss. There's a version of the world where AI makes accents irrelevant.
The idea that you'll have a device that speaks for you, just send the AI and stay at home, right?
I'd love to start with your origin story, because you didn't move to US as a little kid. You were already almost a grown up, and you grew up in Albania, a very particular country, because of what happened right during the time you grew up there. So I'm very curious about the version of who you were before coming to the US. How do you think the Albania shaped you?
Right away with the deep questions. I love it. Yeah, so I grew up there. I moved to the US when I was 18. So as you said, I was born and raised there. And it is a country with a really interesting, really rich history. At the time when I was born, it was shortly after communism. And it was at the early days of democracy, and the country was going through a lot of changes. There were a lot of so I kind of grew up in that time period of a lot of upheaval, change, enthusiasm, chaos, and I do have memories.
It never is up and to the right?
Yeah, with a lot of zigzags
Yeah.
on the way, and I mean I remember that I think there was a very strong sense of in my family, but also in the country in general, education as a really, really important thing for progress, both individual and at the wider country level. So I do remember a huge focus on that. And, and at the time going to school with 40 to 50 other kids in the same classroom and a lot of competition, the resources were pretty scarce, right? There were not a lot of extracurriculars, not a ton of ways to stand out. So that kind of creates a lot of competition, a healthy competition, I think, but it did kind of train me to be really scrappy and to try to find those opportunities as they show up and to like always jump for it and like be the first one to raise your hand and kind of get heard and stand out in a room of a lot of people who also wanted to do the same thing. So it was a really interesting, I think, upbringing that kind of shaped who I am, and I think makes a lot of sense that I actually ended up becoming a founder and entrepreneur because I kind of figured out how to make the most out of scarce resources from that young age.
In that environment, how did the idea of moving to the US came to you?
It was sadly very common. In Albania, a lot of people do move outside of the country to find better opportunities, better education, and also job opportunities in the future. Hopefully that will change one day, but right now it's still immigration is still very, very common. And it was an idea that was planted to me from an early age, from my parents, especially my dad. Uh, Albania is actually one of the most pro-American countries in the world. So the
Wow.
idea of moving eventually to
That's a
the
fun
US,
fact.
the American dream was always a very I think for maybe a lot of people outside of the US was like a really strong concept with a very strong brand. So yeah, from when I was young, it was kind of this dream of eventually moving there and getting to go to one of these world-renowned universities. And so that's kind of when the idea started. But obviously, it was a dream for a very long time. And then when I was in high school, I started to actually do some of my own homework of what would it actually look like to get that done, and figuring out the entire application process for US colleges, which was very convoluted, very different from what I was aware of in Albania or even in Europe. Kind of figuring it was a process of figuring that whole thing out on my own, figuring out the tests that I needed to take, the
Yeah.
letters of recommendation I needed to get, and all those things, and putting it together. And
I guess you figured that out, how to apply to jail. I think you went to from undergrad,
yeah, I went to Yale.
from from
Mhm.
Albania. But the funny thing is that your legal door into the US eventually, I mean, I guess it came in first with a student visa, but then because your dad won the green card lottery when you were
Yeah.
young enough still to be included. How do you make sense of that part now? Because it's like part of it was part of the journey, is you worked super hard for it, and then it's also this part which is pure chance, right?
Yeah, it's really funny. So that happened when I was already at Yale, had gotten there through my own merit. None of my family lived in the US. I'd actually never visited the US before I moved here.
Wow.
And I was a junior in college and I was right under 21 at that point when my dad, who had applied for the green card diversity lottery visa for almost 20 years at that point,
Wow.
got it. And yeah, it was that thing where I think with not to make this too philosophical, but I think with entrepreneurs, it's always going to be a mix of like effort and also luck. And I think it was exactly this. I mean, I was at the exactly right time because I was already here. I wanted to stay here. May have had already a chance to stay here but it would have been jumping through more hoops because
Yep.
I was in an F1 visa. I would have had to figure out a job that would sponsor my
Yes.
H1B, go through the lottery. I had some international friends back at Yale who went through that process and who got it and got to stay, and some who didn't and had to go
Yep.
home or go somewhere else. So it was like a 50-50 chance. So getting that kind of stroke of luck at that point was definitely really helpful. But yeah, it's slightly ironic that even even when you get to go to one of the best colleges in the world, the immigration system is so weird and you don't get
Yeah.
to stay automatically. So you kind of need that extra luck sometimes. I hope that eventually will change because it makes no sense that the US wouldn't want to keep some of
Yep.
the
The best people.
people from all over the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
That's so funny. I found out about the diversity visa literally the year I moved to the US. I
Mm.
got my O1, and then I found out a friend of mine had gotten it. And I was like, dude, I didn't know that even existed. So I should have been applying
Everyone
to
in
that.
Albania knows it exists. It's like the application rate is like 80% of the country's
Really?
population.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe there's some countries where it's not so well known that it's a good hack or arbitrage in your
Yeah.
probabilities into getting to the US.
Yeah, that's why it took years. Yeah.
Let's talk about the motivation behind your company, which in a very simpler way, or put in a simple way, is accents. But I want to start just from a more fun angle. What is, I guess, the funniest or most embarrassing moment you remember regarding your own accent?
Which one do I get to pick? I mean, there are so many. I guess for quick background, by the time I moved to the US, I had learned English in school for almost 10 years, right? Since I was, I think, in second or third grade or something like that. And I felt very confident. I'd passed all the tests, right? It was good enough to get me into college. What I also realized is that I'd only learned it from teachers who had an accent, who are also Albanian. Even though I'd watched some TV, wasn't enough to like train my ears and my mouth to speak closer to what a native speaker sounds like. It was this gap between what I actually like my writing, my reading, my understanding skills, and my speaking that I didn't realize until I moved and people were constantly asking me to repeat myself. And I was like, why is this a thing? And it really took me by surprise. And I remember, it was a mix of things. Like I remember from the dining hall and mispronouncing the word lettuce, like lettuce or something, because it makes no sense the way it's spelled. Even my major was ethics, politics, and economics. And, it's like one of economics, especially, is one of those words where stress shifts. It's economy, but economics. So I think I would say like economics or something like that. I was my own major in college. And it's a lot of these like kind of paper cuts, both like in social environments and then also in more professional environments in the classroom and job interviews or internship interviews at the time that, started kind of adding up. And initially it was funny, but then once they added up more and more, I realized, ooh, I don't sound the way that I do in my head. And now I need to start filtering myself, always questioning before I speak whether I'm going to say it right. And all these things, start adding up to something that is quite meaningful for your ability to integrate, to be yourself, to be confident, and also to get eventually those opportunities that you deserve work-wise. So it stayed with me for a very long time until many years later I built BoldVoice to kind of help others who are in the same shoes.
My own fun anecdote with accents, probably the one that pushed me to eventually find and try BoldVoice, was that I was working at Rich Capital. And when I first got to the US, I would say Rich Capital. And people would laugh at me because, I mean, that's a very provocative name for a venture capital firm. Right?
There's some even worse mispronunciations that actually sounds like you're swearing in a meeting, like
Yeah.
focus, for example, is a very tricky one to get right. So it could be worse.
I'm curious for you, was the hardest part how people saw you, or maybe not feeling fully yourself when you spoke?
It's a good question. I think it's a mix of both. Honestly, I think it's both. Initially, you speak with the same amount of confidence before you realize that people will see you differently, and then you kind of start to see that they react differently from what you expect. Maybe they're not paying attention as much. Maybe you can kind of see that a few people want to tell you up front, right? Oh, you have a strong
Yeah.
accent, even though I've also heard that. There are some people who will also say that, or some people who will correct you, which is sometimes even the kind thing to do when done in a private environment. But most people, it's awkward to say something
Yeah.
about it. So it's gradually you start to see that people kind of see you and perceive you and hear you differently than, again, how you hear yourself in your own head. And then it kind of also becomes a thing that you're more aware of. So it's like a double issue, both your self-confidence and also your how you're perceived. Both of these are true, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree. So I think both were important factors.
What I love about Bold Voice is, I mean, you're addressing this topic of accents, but it's one of those topics that, like, it's obvious for a lot of people, but at the same time, it's not so obvious. Maybe for most immigrants, it just becomes part of who you are, right? You just
Mhm.
take it for what it is, and never think about it as maybe something you should improve. Maybe it's a few people, but not everyone. So I'm curious, in what point you said, hey, this thing that I've experienced might be a interesting business opportunity, an interesting market, or an interesting need to serve.
Well, I'd like to reframe the keyword of accent on what we're doing. At the end of the day, accent is just it's not the goal. At the end of the day, it's all about communication clarity and confidence. You could still
Yeah,
have an accent and be super clear, confident, and
yeah,
connect with your audience, and that's what matters at the end of the day. And what we're trying to help people work through are the things that sometimes can be called accent, but are your pronunciation clarity? Are you using the right sounds, or are you swapping sounds that make people think you're saying the wrong word? Your cadence, are you speaking too fast and people can follow you? Or your word stress, right? Are you putting the stress in the wrong word, which makes people again have to work harder to understand you?
yeah.
So I think the
So
word
it's like a catch-all phrase, basically.
work accent, yeah, comes with a lot of, and rightfully so, with a lot of baggage,
Yeah.
which I think it kind of almost does us a disservice, because if we think of like, oh, I don't want to erase my accent, it's very fair to say, and that's not what we are here to do. Um, but we are here to help you with all those things that we mentioned
Yeah.
that serve you be the best communicator you can be. Because to be frank, right, if you're professional in today's world, especially white collar professional, your speaking and your communication is a huge part of how you'll be seen, perceived, how you'll convince people and get those opportunities. If you're a founder, it's a huge marker of whether you'll be able to fundraise. And again, it's not about perfection. It's never about sounding American,
Yeah.
but it's just about, again, clarity and confidence at the end of the day. So my gut feeling is, again, this was something that it's a pretty universal immigrant experience, and I was very let down by all the English learning that I did that didn't prepare me for being able to actually speak
Mm,
in English at the same
okay.
level communication proficiency as native speakers. And I took a look around. I saw that there's still no tools that help people do this, and I decided it was a big enough opportunity that with a huge market, both here immigrants in the US, but also people outside of the US who also want to speak with confidence with international counterparts, clients, team
Mhm.
members, and so forth. So it felt like a very large overlooked niche that was ours to work on as me and my co-founder both being immigrants who really understood this space and this problem.
You mentioned people not necessarily want to get rid of their accent or sound more American, because I think at least in my case, it's such an integral part of who you are. And I think I felt this personally, where after practicing or even using BoldVoice, and everybody goes, "Hey, am I sounding more American?" Uh, so I'm curious, how does that translate into how you thought about the product? I guess it's not only physical experience in the sense of, okay, you have to pronunciate the th in this way, but it's also the message you're giving to your customers.
We've thought a lot about this from the very early days, and we've been very careful with how we've built our brand as well as our actual product experience to make sure that we're framing everything again from this perspective of communication, confidence, and
Mm-hmm.
empowerment, not from the perspective of a flaw that needs to be fixed. Very common word you that is sometimes used around this area that speech coaches will sometimes use is accent correction or accent reduction, which is something that we do not use because we don't believe that you're correcting or reducing something. We believe you're just learning a skill set, just the same way you'd practice your public speaking, the same way that you maybe earlier in your English learning journey worked on your writing skills and other aspects of your vocabulary, for example. You now work on pronunciation. I also think that hopefully if we do our work right, we can make BoldVoice become a bigger and bigger part of how English learning is done so that it's done better to begin with, so that maybe kids when they're young, they learn to speak with a more accurate pronunciation while they're also learning to write and read more accurately in English and developing all those skills at once. So yeah, I think the way that we've been thinking about it from the beginning was with a lot of care around you're building a skill, and also with focus in so the app listens to how you speak and then it personalizes your learning experience according to the things you need to most work on. And for those things, when we select those things, we prioritize ability to be understood and to be clear. So there might be certain you know, sound swaps that you're making that might not be as impactful for your ability to be understood. For example, if you say massage instead of massage, like that last sound, people are going to get what you're saying. But if you say to your point, like rich versus reach or
Mm-hmm.
ship versus sheep, that's like a big, much bigger confusion point.
Mm-hmm.
So we really focus on those sounds that or pronunciation patterns, word stress, and things like that, that are most impactful again for clarity and ability to be understood instead of the smaller cosmetic things.
Super interesting. How did AI play into this? Because I'm sure that, and I remember talking about this with you when we met, there was not necessarily off the shelf technology that you could apply to this use case. And there were some limitations in the stack that you had available, and you had to build a lot of internal stuff or models to be able to grab this particular use case that we're describing. So I'm curious, what did you have to build or research yourself because it didn't exist out of the box?
We're basically, sometimes we say internally, we're an audio AI lab masked as a consumer company because it's a really hard problem. Accents are and how people speak is very varied. There's no single right or wrong. There are multiple ways to be correct, and
Yeah.
so we constantly have to develop our ability or our technology's ability to hear things as precisely as a human and specifically an accent coach or a speech coach would, so that we can provide users with the best feedback. And that includes hearing all the sounds at a high level accuracy, hearing all the speech patterns, for example, your pauses, your word stress, your thought stress. Sorry if I'm getting too linguistic, but there are a lot of of speech, and hearing them with a level of nuance is really important because our effectiveness lives and dies by our accuracy. Because if
Hmm.
we don't hear it correctly, then we can't give you the best feedback so that you can actually improve. So we're constantly working on it. We have some of the best speech and dialect coaches of the world in the world working with us, and we work with these coaches both on the app. They are the people who are writing the content and who are in the videos that you get in the app. But they're also the people who are helping train the our audio machine learning model, and they're training it to hear as well as they do so that it can be as accurate as they are in one-on-one sessions. Then we have some really great audio ML engineers in the team who are, deeply integrated in this in the process of constantly retraining the model with how the coaches are grading, evaluating, and also all the user feedback that we get, all the user audio samples, and also their notes when something doesn't go well. We have a lot of automations in our system to actually take that feedback in and improve it. So we've put a lot of effort and into doing this, and because it's our core focus and obsession, we've managed to, at this point, I can fairly confidently, not 100% confidence, but I can say that we've built the one AI in the world that is best at hearing how you actually sound, which is again the foundation for actually being able to help you sound even more confident and clear.
And you started doing this way before it was cool.
Before it was cool, we were doing audio AI. Before it was cool, we were tiny team. Before it was cool, there. It's so
And
funny.
not the budgets of the labs. So, given this data set and models you've built internally, I'm curious when you look forward, what other use cases could be enabled or empowered by this unique asset you've built?
That's such a VC question of you. Yeah, I mean, again, right now we're laser focused on the core uh, mission, which is helping people sound more confident and more clear, and expanding that by making more powerful models. We're also working to not just build this educational product, which is what we have right now, but also get more integrated, be able to properly hear you and score, grade, give you feedback on longer samples of so that eventually you can also use BoldVoice to score and not score, but give you feedback on your actual real life meetings. For example, the recording that we're having right now, we're building more and more capabilities or more accurate scoring over longer samples of speech so that you can get feedback on something like this and make it more integrated with people's real lives. Down the line, there could also be some interesting applications, for example, for building transcription technology that is more accent aware and is more accurate at transcribing people, which is also a huge problem. If you talk to Siri or even record your voice, sometimes all those mistranscriptions that might pop up. This work that we're doing could also be used to serve those. And there's many other future opportunities like that. But again, for now, we're really focused on how can we make this the most valuable speech coach for our users that has the widest surface areas and catches all those little things and gives them to them in a way that is as clear and actionable as possible so that they can actually not just be aware of it, but also improve it.
Speaking of busy questions, I'm curious, how have you thought about pricing? Because you're in this particular category, which is, I'll put it broadly, language learning or consumer language learning, but you serve a particular niche which maybe has a higher ROI of investing in a product like yours, like your case or mine. You're so worried about your accent. Maybe it's because you have access to the US market, right, in terms of business opportunities, job opportunities. You're maybe coming to say to the US, or no, you're coming from abroad and coming to the US to expand your business. So that means you usually have a higher willingness to pay versus the average consumer that might pay for Duolingo, right? How have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong push and pull on both sides of the market. So currently, Bold Voice is priced pretty similarly to a Duolingo subscription, premium subscription, which is $150 a year, which boils down to $12.50 a month, right? So it's super accessible, especially if you compare it with if you hired a one-on-one coach, just 1 hour with a coach would cost more than what
Yep.
Bold Voice costs for a whole year. And we chose that again strategically. I think we obviously, as you said, some of the users who we work with are these kinds of people where the willingness to pay and the ROI is much higher. But also we're aware that a lot of the we don't want price to be the reason that immigrants would otherwise maybe with BoldVoice get better jobs and advance their career or earlier in their careers and that don't yet have a lot of that ability to pay are priced out of our product. So when we think, when we also want to make this a product that works for someone who is working professionally here in the US already in their career, doing well, but also someone who's still in Mexico or in Albania or somewhere
Yeah.
else that where they're again want to be part of this global economy, want to continue to advance their career and get these better opportunities, but might be priced out of something that is too expensive. And part of the mission of the company, by the way, is also that today accent coaching exists with a one-on-one coach, but only CEOs can access it. So the whole point why we made Bold Voice and why we made it AI powered instead of one-on-one coaching is to make it more accessible. So I think we'll continue to iterate here, but the vision is to I'd prefer any day to capture a wider market and be helpful for more people than to make this turn this into another, niche, very expensive product that serves fewer people, even if it maximizes short-term revenue.
Let's talk a bit about your team. When we met, I think you guys were 7 people and doing, I think, around $10 million in revenue, which was super impressive. And that was, I guess, before, almost a couple of years ago, before the explosion of coding agents. So at that time, it was always even more impressive. How did you build something this technically deep with such a small team?
By being very focused on the one thing that we're doing for the users that we're building for, by building a really great team. I'm really proud of the team that we've built. They really care about what we're doing. They're really good at what they do. We also have built a culture where we allow people to do their best work and really focus and have a lot of heads down time. So we've built, with a small team, you don't need a lot of coordination overhead. You don't need any hierarchy. You don't need a lot of meetings. We were always very sensitive to minimizing meeting time so people have heads down focus time. So I think it's really hiring great people, having a great mission that they can be motivated by. Also, as a consumer company, especially for us, we talk to the users a lot. Every week we have multiple user interviews that people jump into, and that's both great at being motivating and energizing and keeping people connected to the person that they're building for, but also
Yep.
a quick feedback loop so that we're super focused on building the right thing for that exact person. I think we're already at 10 people now, which is still too small for our ambition. So we're definitely looking to grow, but the goal is to get the team to 20 to 25 by end of the year. So still a much, much leaner company compared to our revenue, because we do think we can move faster and continue to have this culture of a lot of autonomy and a lot of ownership in each single person we hire.
How have you managed to make work this, let me put it this way, different cultures between research and training AI and models and product? Because don't necessarily are the same. And I think it's something that I'm seeing a lot of, especially AI companies today that are growing really fast, that they're starting to bring that research function internally as a way to push their products and be at the frontier. But usually people that come from those backgrounds have different, I guess they may come from more academic backgrounds, are more interested just in the pure research. It's not necessarily like an engineering or product way of doing things.
We probably don't hire those people. I think we're really focused on people who do have a lot of very impressive technical backgrounds, but also who really care about the problem and who want to be applied ML engineers. We're not building, again, even though we are doing a lot of cutting edge AI research, at the end of the day, all of it is to serve the user. So we think about how can we shorten the cycle between research and the product reaching the user as much as possible. Our ML engineers sit in the same space as the rest of the team, right? We're all, most of our team, the vast majority of our team is in person in New York. There's always that communication, and the focus is always, again, building features for the users. So sometimes we've also said this, we've talked to great people who we've interviewed who seem really technically strong, but have a much different way of building and iterating that is way slower, way more research based. And we've always said we don't care about beautiful code. We care that it works and it solves the user problem. And that might not be the right approach for every company, but it's worked for us again because we have such a specific segment that we're serving with a particular product. So we're not just building random cool tools. We're building to solve a specific problem.
Do you think more companies will need to bring that research function internally to be able to differentiate themselves? Because it feels like it's a different type of company that the traditional SaaS or consumer apps we had, I don't know 10 years ago, for instance.
Probably very product dependent. Again, for something that it's a pure AI lab, I think it could make sense to have research that takes a way longer time
Yeah.
and it's more divorced. But for anything, especially consumer facing, I think it makes a lot of sense for to have that stress test of does a model actually solve a problem and keep that function as close as possible to the product. At least that's what's worked for us.
You guys brought that research function internally many years ago, and it clearly paid out for
Mm-hmm.
you guys. My sense is that moving forward, it seems more like that's the pattern for a company that wants to stay differentiated and be able to scale, bring having research inside, even if you're
I
not a
see.
lab,
Yeah.
right? Like an
Um,
application companies that want to be like big, grow, and be sustainable businesses in the long term, they need that internally. At least that's what I'm saying. So I'm curious if you agree with that or not.
I think it depends on the business and what your moat is. There might be businesses where the moat is something that is more process driven or particular kind of data or information. And in that case, you could use some sort of a off the shelf model and really customize it with a different X factor that you might have. But again, I think more and more, if you're just a consumer company that's using, off the shelf models and you're just repackaging them, and then the only differentiator you have is your marketing machine, it seems like that could work short term, but long term, competitors will catch up with you. They will start outspending you. Your ads will get more expensive. So I cannot see a way that long term you can differentiate and build a successful, durable business without a product differentiation. Now, the product differentiation could come from a lot of different things. It doesn't always need to be AI or ML models. In our case, that's what it
Yeah.
actually is, but it might be something else. But I think the core here is that you need to build a differentiated product and have some sort of a moat around it.
You touched on marketing, and I'm curious, how have you seen the consumer marketing landscape shift the last couple of years, given all the AI tools out there? I watch it from the
Yeah,
outside, and I
no,
feel like
okay.
must be hard to
It
catch
is.
people's attentions,
It
right?
is. It is tough. It's tougher than ever. I think. Again, there's so much competition and way more like every day it seems like there's a new AI tool that is being launched and marketed on Instagram and on TikTok, and a lot of it is again wrappers around with little differentiation or little product value, and but you, the unfortunate thing is that the consumer doesn't necessarily know that, because you can
No.
put together a really polished ad and then have some not so ethical patterns in your onboarding funnel and your paywall that stucks people with, and also leads consumers to mistrust than other apps and other subscriptions. So it's not just more competition for your Meta CPM, but it's also customers getting maybe decreasing their trust in the types of products that they buy that affects all the other apps. So there's way more noise than there's ever been. I think a lot of the attention is also moving away from the typical channels of Instagram, for example, with more of these AI tools, discovery happening more, ChatGPT or Claude, where you can't just run ads on it. So the playbook is changing a lot. Obviously, companies that have relied on SEO are totally seeing that shift. So it's a really fun time, I guess, to be a consumer company. You have to reinvent a lot of playbooks. But I do think, as going back to my earlier point, that the way to stay relevant and to continue to differentiate yourself long term continues to be product. And that's what I'm also seeing in the market. using product as your best marketing, using your new features that you're developing and your differentiation to continue to drive users to choose you instead of your competitors.
What are maybe some other examples of things you're doing different in terms of marketing given this environment? And I know these things might change, but I'm just curious the direction that you're taking or principles behind your decisions given the changing landscape.
We're thinking a lot about what are things that only we can do that other companies cannot do. So how can we use our core advantage and our core competency to build things that no one else can build? Again, to stand apart so we're not just competing in the same channels that everyone else is with a message that everyone can copy easily. So one great example of that is that we built and launched this tool called the Accent Oracle, which is that we train to hear and detect where your accent is from at a scarily high level of accuracy. And it's free. You don't even have to download BoldVoice. You can just go to accentOracle.com and try it out. And people loved using it, and it's just an example of us using our ML to create this
Yeah.
really fun, engaging experience that people like to try and share with friends, and that had that really fun viral component in it, and drove a lot of users to then download the app and join and subscribe. So that's an example of, again, getting creative and figuring out what are some of the interesting things that only we can build instead of just competing in the same old channels everyone else is also in.
That's such a great idea. You just said that you're going from a team of 10 to a team of maybe 20 by the end of the year. I'm curious, how have you thought about your org chart given everything that's happening with AI? Because I'm sure also the capabilities of your own team have maybe increased or grown faster than you expected. So did you keep the same plan of hiring? Did you change it?
It's like you've been in our conference rooms and you've been listening to our conversation. Yeah, it's something we're actively thinking about. I think it's a little different from us than most companies because other companies overhired and then now they're like
Yeah.
rethinking their org chart. We've always been so lean and so AI empowered and I wouldn't say an AI native because we started the company before ChatGPT really took off, but still, we use it and it's embedded everywhere in how we work. So I think we're still at a stage where we don't have any, headcount waste. We have quite the
Yeah.
opposite. Still in the process of growing, and it's really funny with especially if you're on Twitter, right? Like people every day they're like is dead, and yet
Yeah.
actually we need engineers, and then design
Yeah.
is
Hire
dead.
many.
Claude can do it for you, but no, actually, you do need designers, but you need designers who can work with Claude and can get even
Yeah.
faster and better at doing that. So I don't think we've changed. There's not been any type of a job that has been eliminated. It's just that when we hire people, we want to see those kinds of behaviors. We want to see people when they join who can leverage those tools and are very curious and are always tinkering so that person we hire can be hopefully 2x, 3x more effective than they were a few years ago before or even a year ago before this level of tooling was available.
That makes sense. Let's future cast a bit. There's a version of the world where AI maybe makes accents or differences in language irrelevant. Like this idea of real-time translation, better transcription, the type of devices that you get when you go to a conference, right, like an international conference, and people are using, and maybe that those type of devices, will be on my, on my glasses or my AirPods. Do you buy that version of the future? I mean, obviously, maybe you're biased, but I'm curious how you see that
Yeah, I am biased.
playing out. Curious how you think about like the role of language in this context where it seems like devices can take a big chunk of it.
I find it really bleak, the idea that you'll have a device that speaks for you. I like to think of AI as something that does a lot of the background work for us, but then what's left that will stay and endure as like a human thing is communication, speaking, connecting with people and making your own voice heard. So I buy and I'm happy to have AI be my bookkeeper and my CFO, and also do a lot of this analytical work for us and continue to support it in other ways. But the idea of having a little device speak for you and you're just there as a body, then what's the point? Just send the AI and stay at home, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to think of a
Or
world
not even
where,
speaking for you, but yeah, but maybe, I mean, translating, right? Well,
yeah.
okay, it's the same, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think translation could be, yeah, could be interesting, but I still think there's, again, human connection to be had by just using your own natural voice and speaking and connecting with people one on one. I find it hard to imagine that we'll want to get let that go when it's like, I think, again, the most core human thing. And I, in a world again where AI does more and more of our jobs, I would like to think that communication is, if
Not
maybe
one of those.
the last most
The last
human
one.
one left to us to continue to do. And
They'll
there's
all be
also,
Toastmasters.
I mean, there's also tools that are like trying to do real-time accent translations on calls and things like that. And there's a time and place for those. I think maybe call centers is something that makes sense because it's very transactional. But I think those are anyway just one step away from being totally automated, where you don't even need a person in the loop. But I think for anything that is not purely transactional, we're actually trying to build a relationship. And maybe that relationship, by the way, is not just on the screen, but you also will eventually maybe meet that person face to face. You want to develop your own voice and your own skills, and you don't just give it away to AI to do whatever it wants with it.
Given that, what do you think is the 6 or 7 star version of Bold Voice?
The vision that gets me really excited is an always on speech coach that is always with you and is always hearing and helping you communicate more confidently in every room you walk in, 24/7 if you wanted, with exactly the right thing to say, the right feedback in the right moment, so that it's not just, again, a product that you use for 10 minutes a day and then you close and then you continue on with your life, but it's something that can really accompany you and help you upgrade your speaking and your communication in every aspect of your life.
If you had to thank 1 or 2 people for pushing you to think bigger, who would they be and why?
It's a really good question. I'll do the cliche thing, my family. I do think, I mean, going back to I think the story I was telling you about my upbringing, I think my dad has had this huge impact on me from the beginning of being the dreamer and instilling some of the ambition in me, of even making me know that dreaming about something like going to Yale or Harvard was possible. So I think having that person in your life even tell you what's possible to dream is huge. So I was really lucky to have that.
100%.
And then I think my co-founder, Ilya, who's been on this journey with me from day one. I think as CEO, as CEOs, we get to speak a lot and be the face of the company. But I think this is really a partnership. We've been, hand in hand in this from day one. It's been a few years now. This is not a quick story. We've been building this company for almost 5 years, and having a really strong co-founder partnership has been really important. So I'm lucky to have a great co-founder and CTO.
That's awesome. Anada, thank you so much for the time. I'm a fan of your product, so I was very happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been
Yeah.
fun.